Alrighty, so there's not going to be a whole lot interesting about this particular activity except for when we get into the awesome animation at the end when we open and close it. So I'm just going to basically just go through it, and yeah. So yeah, the first thing I want to do here is I want to start off by creating my layout. And I'm going to go ahead and say set content view r.layout.activity_message. Make sure you hit Alt-Enter to import that. And then for the activity message, that'll be the first thing that I implement. I want to get the entire layout out of the way first. So I'll go ahead and hit Alt-Enter and Enter to create the resource file. And I'm going to create a relative layout for the root element. Then hit OK. Now inside of this, what we have left, what we want to do is we want to bring in our toolbar first. So I'm going to say include layout, include toolbar, and I'm going to give it a ID of include toolbar, so we can position things relative to it in this file. Then I'm going to start off with a frame layout. The frame layout will be match parent, and it'll be below our include toolbar. Inside of our frame layout is where we're going to have our image. So our actual message image is going to appear in here. So I'm going to create an image view with a match parent, width and height, and I'm going to give it a background of 44444. So it'll have a dark background in the case that the entire image doesn't stretch to fill the entire view. And we'll give it a background of ID activity message image. Seems like a straightforward thing to give it. Then we want our text view. Now this text view is going to be the short message, the message that appears on top of the image. And I'm going to throw in some really cool little text effects into it to make sure that this is legible, whether the image that was passed in was light or dark. So we'll start off with this width and height, which will be wrap content and wrap content. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'll go ahead and give him a text of short message. And I'm doing this temporarily. You'll see why. Well, I guess we can keep it here. But I do want to watch this in the preview window as I manipulate its style. The first thing I want to do is give it a gravity or a layout gravity of center, because we want it inside of that frame layout in the middle. And then we'll go ahead and give it a text size of 28 SP. Make it kind of big. And then I want to go ahead and give it a text color of FFF for white. And I'll go ahead and give it a text style of bold. And I'll go ahead and let's give it a background shadow. So I'll give it a background shadow of 000 for black. I'll give it a shadow DX of 0, a shadow DY of 0. So its offset is 0 and 0. So the shadow is going to come out of the text equal amounts. Now, you're probably not going to see this in the preview. I don't believe the preview supports shadows, but you would see this if you actually ran the activity. The shadow, I mean. And then we'll give it a shadow radius of 10. Let's give it a padding of 20 dp. That'll become important here in a second. And we'll go ahead and we'll give it a shadow. I think actually that's it for the shadow. I want to give it a rotation of 10, make it kind of rotated. Now rotations are also not supported in the preview pane, so that's fine. And then I'll give it an ID of activity message short message. And that's that. Now what I want to do is I want to create a relative layout that includes my translate button and the little drawer that comes out with the long message. So to do that, I'm going to create another relative layout, and I'm going to give it a width of match parent and a height of match parent. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give him a background, a very specific background color that'll be similar to that of our toolbar. And the background color will 2211998FC. Or come on. 221998FC. So a semi-transparent bluish color that I like. And then we'll give him an ID of activity show message drawer. We're going to call him our drawer because he's going to slide up when we click on the translate button. Then we need two text views inside of this relative layout. The first one is going to have a wrap content. He's going to be the translate button. So he's going to have a text of translate. And he's going to have an ID of activity show message translate. And then he's going to have a text color of white. And then he's going to have a padding top of 8 SP and a padding bottom of 8 SP, or DP, sorry. So come back there. And then we're going to go ahead and give him a center horizontal of true and a text size of 20 SP. So that's our translate button. So now this panel is going to start off slid all the way down, but then when we click on this button, I'm going to have it slide all the way back up. To facilitate clicking, I am going to go ahead and set the text views clickable to false, and I'm going to set the relatives layout clickable to true. We're going to actually add the click handler on the relative layout itself. So wherever you click on the relative layout, it will either open or close the entire drawer for you. Then I'm going to create another text view. This text view is going to be for the long message. So it's going to have a width of fill parent and a height of wrap content, and I'm going to give it a text color of FFF, and I'm going to give a center in parent true, so it'll appear in the center. I'll give it a text of long message for now, so I can see where it appears, and it appears right there. And I can go ahead and give it a padding of 20 DP. And then maybe change its text size as well. Give it a text size of 20 SP. And that should be good. Now we just need to give it an ID. So an ID of activity show message long message. Or activity, it's not show message, it's activity message. Let's go ahead and change all our IDs. Wow, how did I... Alright, so change all the IDs to activity message, blah, 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 not activity show message. Or not. I mean, really, it depends on what you guys want to do as far as your naming. I just have a very particular naming style for my IDs. Okay, so now that we've exited, let's exit out of this frame layout. The last frame layout I want to do is a progress frame, just like what we've done before. It'll be a frame layout with a match parent. It's going to have a background of EE000000, so a very opaque but slightly transparent black color. And we're given an ID of activity message progress frame, and we're going to give it a clickable of true. Now make sure you get that plus symbol in there for the ID, otherwise it won't work. And then we'll create a progress bar with the wrap content, and a layout gravity of center, and an indeterminate only. To true. Now let's go ahead and take this frame layout, and I'm going to say visibility gone. So I'm going to make him default to not being visible so that I can take a look at what's behind it, and I can kind of fine-tune how I want all of these things to be laid out. And I kind of like this. I might change the opacity of my relative layout. You know, I might bring it up to maybe 7.7 or 8.8 or 9.9 or something like that. That's really up to you guys. You guys can play around with that. When we're actually going to see the short message with its text effects, things are going to look a little different. But I kind of like how it is right now. Now remember, this whole panel is going to be sliding up and down so we can see the short message and the image. But I think that pretty much wraps up all I wanted to do with the layout. I mean, this has all the facilities, all the views that we need in order to implement it. So let's go ahead and jump into the activity and get that guy implemented. It's going to be a pretty straightforward class. All we're doing is loading up a message, and yeah, we will have a menu, but that's not going to be too difficult to implement. Now, the first thing I want to do, however, is I want to create a new public static final string, and I want to call it extra_message_ID. Now, what I'm doing here is I want there to be two ways to get to load the message activity. I want you to be able to load it through a message ID or through a message itself, a fully serialized or deserialized message object. Now, the reason I'm doing this is if we create a notification on our system through a push notification, I want to be able to launch the message activity with nothing more than just an ID of what message has been sent to us without having to go out and actually load it from the, from wherever. Actually have to load it from the web server. I want to be able to just pass an ID into it and have that be displayed for us. So in addition to that, I also am going to create a private static final string state_message. Now the state message is going to be saved in the bundle, and it's going to be used for when we load that extra ID. I want to save or persist that thing that we loaded into our state, our bundle, so that we don't have to reload it. All right, let's go ahead and knock out our fields. I'm going to do private view drawer, private text view translate button, private boolean is open, private int translate offset. So this is going to be the translate offset that we use for animating the drawer opening and closing. We're going to have a private animator set for current animation. We're going to have a private message for our current message. And we're going to have a private view for our progress view. All right. So then what I want to go ahead and do, I guess I can also do a private text view short message and a private text view long message as well. So then what I want to do is, let's go ahead and on our create, let's just grab all of our views first. So let's say drawer equals find view ID, r.id, message drawer. Our translate button is cast a text view, find view ID, r.id, translate. And then our is open, we can initialize to false, don't need to, either way. Our progress view, or progress frame, I'm going to be consistent, I'm going to call it progress frame, is going to be set to find view ID, r.id, message progress frame. Not send message progress frame, normal message progress frame. I really should have just done a single view for that in an include. Short message equals cast a text view, find view BID, r.id, short message. Long message is cast a text view, find view ID, r.id, blah, 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 blah. You know what I'm saying. Okay, so now we have all of our views aliased out. I do want to go ahead and clear out my short message and long message. So I want to say short message dot set text to blank and long message dot set text to blank. I'm doing this because inside of our layout itself, I have text in there for debugging purposes to see the preview. But then when I load this up, I want to make sure it's cleared out so the users never see that debug text. I also will want to go ahead and say progress frame dot set visibility view gone, just to be double sure that it's not going to start off showing. All right, let's go ahead and do our toolbar. Our toolbar, I'm going to say toolbar dot set navigation icon is going to be r.drawable.icab close. And then toolbar dot set navigation on click listener. And I'm going to pass in a new on click listener. Now, what I'm going to pass in here is I'm going to pass in, or I'm going to invoke close message result okay. Now, close message is going to be a method that we're going to write. It's going to contain all of the logic for, well, closing the message. And returning to whatever, finishing the activity, returning to whatever parent activity was responsible for invoking this one. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say message equals null. Then I'm going to say if saved state does not equal null, message equals saved state dot get parsable state message. So if we already have a save state, if we're rotating the device and the activity got destroyed, for example, then just extract the message from that. Otherwise, we're going to do a little bit of crazy logic here. Otherwise, I'm going to say if message equals null, then I'm going to say message equals get intent dot get parsable extra message. Then I'm going to say if message is still null, then int id equals get intent get int extra message id -1. And then if id equals -1, or does not equal -1, let's do that. I always like the positive things first in my if else box, and I consider ID not being the default to be a positive thing, even though it's a not equals operator, which feels like a negative thing. In reality, this operation I believe is a positive thing, so I'll do it first in the if else block. I'm going to say progress frame dot set visibility view visible, and then I'm going to say bus dot post new messages load or get message details request passing in ID. Otherwise, if the message ID does equal -1, then I'm going to say message equals new message 1 new Gregorian calendar for my date, short message for my short message, long message for my long message. I'm going to pass a null for my image URL. For my user details, I'm going to say new user details, 1 for the ID, true for his contact, person for display name, username is lowercase person, and avatar URL is just blank. Don't really care about that. And then finally, we'll pass in false for is from us and false for is read. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying if there is no message. So let's just run through this real fast. If we have a message saved in our bundle, load that. If we don't, load it from the intent. If we can't find it from the intent, load the ID from the intent. If we can load the ID from the intent, ask the server for more information about the message so we can get the full message object. Otherwise, create a dummy message right here that we can use for testing purposes. And that's it. So now, what I can do is all the way at the bottom here, oh, not that far, all the way at the bottom here, I'm going to say if message does not equal null, then show message message. So if we, at any point during this huge branch of logic right here, if we were able to acquire a message object, go ahead and show it. All right, so yeah, let's go ahead and implement our subscribe to our get message details request real fast, because that's really easy. So we'll do subscribe public void on message details loaded, and I'll do messages get message details response. Then I'm going to say progress frame dot set visibility view gone, and I guess I could do this on resume. I could go ahead and say scheduler dot invoke on resume response get class new runnable, and then say progress frame set visibility view gone. So we get rid of our progress frame. And I'll say if not response did succeed. By the way, that made a response final. Ooh, there's a slight bug here. I didn't have my get message details response inherit from service response. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, now that we have that done, let's come back here. And so if not response did succeed, then I want to say response show error toast message activity dot this, and then I'm going to say return. Otherwise, show message response dot message. So here's that show message method again. That's just going to be responsible for, well, showing the message. The next thing I want to do, I want to get another trivial method out of the way. I'm going to do an override of onSave instance state. So go ahead and do that. And I'm going to say super onSaved instance state. That's important. Make sure you invoke back into the super. And then I'm going to say outstate dot put parsable, passing in state message and message. So once we load the message, we're going to save it in our bundle, so we don't have to load the message twice if we were passed in an ID. All right, now let's do our show message method. So I'm going to say private void show message message. Now I'm going to say current message equals message. So now we have a reference to our message object. Then I'm going to say string created at equals date utils format date time this for the context message dot get created at dot get time in milliseconds date utils. Now this time I'm going to do date utils dot format show date only to make things a little simpler. Then I'm going to say if message is from us, I'm going to say get support action bar dot set title sent on created at. Otherwise, get support action bar dot set title received on created at. Then let's go ahead and set our long message. So I'm going to say long message dot set text message dot get long message. Then set our short message dot set text message get short message. And then I'm going to go ahead and say if message dot get image URL does not equal null and not message get image URL is empty. Then I'm going to say to do load image. Now, we're not going to get to this to-do until we hook up to the real API, because there's something special we're going to need to do for security reasons in this line of code. So for testing, we're going to leave the get image URLs null and simply not load it into anything. Then I'm going to go and say invalidate options menu, which will make sense in a bit. We already talked about what invalidate options menu is. Basically, we're going to have this reply button, and the reply button will be invisible if the message came from us. So because you can't load a message from yourself and reply to it, because that's silly. So we'll go ahead and invalidate our options menu, which will update the options menu for us. Then what I want to do is I want to say intent default result equals new intent. Set result, result okay, default result. Now what I'm doing here, or I'll also want to say default result dot put extra result extra message ID, message get ID. So basically what I'm doing here is if we ever finish this activity without setting a result intent, this makes sure that that's already been set, so that we don't have to worry about making sure it's always been set, because there's code elsewhere in the project that relies on every response from the message activity containing the result extra message ID. Let's say the user hit the back button, for example. We want to make sure that this result extra message ID is the default thing that is returned back, because every other bit of code is expecting it to be. Then finally, we can do bus.post new messages.mark message as read request message.getID. In fact, we can make this a little better by saying, if not message is read, then mark it as read. All right. So moving on, now let's go ahead and do our private void close message, which takes in an int result code. This is basically the same thing as this code up here, except we now can pass in a custom result code. So I'm going to say intent data equals new intent. Data put extra result message ID current message dot get ID, and then we can say set result result code data, and then finish. Alrighty, so now let's go ahead and write out our options menu. So I'm going to start with override our onCreate options menu. Oh, come on. onCreate options menu. onCreate options. There you are. Trying to run away from me. And for this, what I'm going to do is I'm saying get menu inflator dot inflate r dot menu dot activity message menu, which doesn't exist yet, but it will here in a second, and then menu, and then returning true. Let's go ahead and implement our menu resource real fast, because it's pretty straightforward. We only have a couple of menu items. Hit Alt, Enter, Enter, Enter. Then inside of here, I'm going to create an item with an ID of activity message menu reply. So this is our reply thing that I was talking about a second ago. And he's going to have an icon of drawable IC action reply. And then he's going to have a title of reply and an app show as action equal to if room. Now, of course, make sure you hit Alt-Enter to import that XML namespace there at the top. Now we're going to create an item with another ID, not surprisingly, with an activity message menu contact. So this will be a button that you use to click to get to the contact who sent you this message, with an icon of drawable IC action user, and a title as show profile, and a show as action, an app show as action, not an Android show as action. That's important because we're using app compat set to if room. Then finally, we'll do our message menu delete. And our delete will, not surprisingly, have the icon of IC action delete. And he'll have the title of delete. And we'll also give him an app show as action of if room. You might want to relegate the delete button to the overflow menu if you want to. It's up to you how you want to implement that or how you want it to look. Now let's jump back to the message activity. Notice how that error goes away now that we have that resource created. Let's go ahead and create our on options item selected. So on options item selected. Now for this guy, let's first grab the ID of that menu item. So ID equals item.getID, get item ID. I'm going to say if ID equals r.id activity message contact, menu contact, then we want to load the contact. So I'm going to say intent equals new intent, this contact activity dot class. You know, it'd be really cool if I wrote like a factory method on these activities that accepts all of their required parameters, and then they did all this stuff for you. Probably clean up the code a little bit, and I don't know why this is just occurring to me. Would have cleaned this up quite a bit. Intent put extra contact activity dot extra user details. Then we'll pass in current message dot get user, and then we'll start activity for intent, and we'll say return true. Else if ID is r.id activity message menu reply. Now for replying, pretty much the same stuff. Intent equals new intent this, but we're going to do new message activity dot class instead. And for the put extra, we're going to be passing in new message activity dot extra contact, but we're still passing in current message dot get other user. And then we're going to start activity intent and return true. Otherwise, else if ID is r.id activity message menu delete, then I'm going to go ahead and create a dialog real fast. So I'm going to say alert dialog equals new dialog builder, this for the context, dot set title delete message question mark dot set positive button to delete, passing in a new on-click listener, which will say bus.post new messages delete message request of current message dot get ID. And then we're also going to say close message request image deleted. And that's it there. Then I'm going to go ahead and set the cancelable to false. And I'm going to set the neutral button to cancel with the null click handler. And then I'm going to create it. And then I'm going to say dialog.show. So pretty straightforward dialog. All we do is if they hit the delete button, we go ahead and we push a request. We push a request for this message to be deleted on the server, and then B, we close the message, but we send back a notification to whoever started this activity that the user decided to delete this message. Now, all the way at the end here, we simply want to return false. So outside of all these if statements, we want to return false to indicate to Android that we didn't handle this options menu click. Okay. So, yeah, now let's go ahead and do our on-prepare options menu. So on-prepare options, no, not on-prepare options panel, on-prepare options menu. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show and hide the delete or the reply to button, depending on if this message was from us or from one of our contacts. So I'm going to say menu.findItem r.id activity message menu reply dot set visible, and I'm going to set visible to current message does not equal null and not current message is from us, and then I'll return true to indicate that we did mutate the menu. All right, now we have two methods left. Now, one of those methods, I'm going to have to go ahead and come up here to all the way back to my onCreate. After we implement our drawer, I'm going to say drawer.set onClickListener is this. So after we grab our drawer out of the find view by ID in our onCreate, I'm going to set the onClickListener to this. And then I'm going to put the keyboard on the squiggles, hit Alt-Enter, select, make it implement this, hit Enter again. And now all the way back at the bottom of the file, we now have this onClick override, which again is necessitated because our class now implements onClickListener. So that's that. But before we implement the onClickListener, which will toggle the drawer, we need to figure out how high the drawer needs to be. So if we come over here and look at this layout, we see that the drawer is open in this layout, but I want this drawer to be moved all the way to the bottom so just the translate is visible. So we need to calculate the offset required in order to achieve that. To do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to override a method. I'm going to override on window focus changed, which is a place where you can. Apparently it's a good place to get good measurements for your different views. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say if translate offset does not equal 0, then translate offset equals drawer.getHeight minus translate button.getHeight. So this will simply make it so if we translated the drawer all the way down to this position, it would be closed, which we want to do as the first thing. So I do want to say drawer.setTranslationY to translate offset. So that'll make the drawer invisible. Well, not invisible. The translate button will still be invisible, but the rest of it will be out of view. All right, now let's implement our onClick. So I'm going to say, first thing I'm going to do is open equals not is open. So we want to flip that bit right there. Then, if current animation does not equal null, then current animation dot stop, or end rather, or cancel. Then what I want to do is I want to say current background color equals cast to color drawable drawer get background dot get color. So we need to get the current color of the drawer so we can animate its color changing. Then I'm going to say int translation y comma color, and then I'm going to say if is open. So if we want to open the drawer, then we want to move the translation y to 0. I want to set the color to color.parse. Come on. Color equals color.parse. Are you kidding me? Color.parse color. There you go. EE1998FC. And then I want to say translate button set text close. So we want to change the color or the opacity of the color of the background, and we want to set the text of the translate button to close, and we want to move it so it's visible on the screen. Otherwise, translation Y is going to be set to translation offset. The color is going to be set to color.parseColor. 221998FC. And the translate button is going to have a set text of translate, again, like its default. Now let's go ahead and create an animation, but we're going to be animating two things. We're animating the translation Y, and we're animating the background colors. So we need two object animators. So I'm going to say object animator translate animator equals object animator dot of float drawer for the object, translation Y, now make sure you get that spelling right, for the property, and then translation Y for the value, and then set duration 100. Now I want another object animator. I want this to be called my color animator, which is going to be an object animator dot of int drawer background color, current background color for the current value, and then color for the target value, and then set duration to 100. Then I'm going to say color animator dot set evaluator new ARBG evaluator. Then I'm going to create my current animator. Current animation equals new animator set. I'm going to say current animator set duration 300 current animation dot play. We want to say play translate animator with color animator, and then we want to start it. All right, let's go ahead and hit play and see what happens. Okay, so if we click on a received message, check that out. Now, it seems like it's mostly working. We can close out, and it seems like everything's mostly working, except, obviously, we're having some a bit of an issue here with our translate not, well, moving properly. I think that could be that if check I put on that window focus change. Let's go ahead and nuke that real fast and then hit play. I think it's just because that method was invoked at a time or multiple times, and at one of the points the proper layout settings, the proper formatting or layout parameters hadn't been set yet. And as you can see, it now works. So now we can all right, let's go ahead and see if our action bar works. I'm going to hop into sent messages, select sent message. Notice how the reply menu goes away. I can click on a contact and I get to that contact, and I can hit delete and say delete, and it goes away. Now if I go to inbox and I do that on my message, come here, say delete, delete, notice how that should have been, yep, that is removed as well. All right, so that is pretty much the UI of the app. Really, all that's left at this point is hooking up to some live services, to some real live services, and dealing with things like push notifications in the actual API. So we do need to talk about the library that we're going to be using for dealing with our web requests. And then after that, basically we're just going to come in here and we're going to create another copy of all of our services and rewrite each one of these methods to use the actual real API. Now don't worry, we're going to write some infrastructure code that will make the individual lines or the individual methods of our services be very, very short. So that'll work out pretty well. All right, I think that's all I wanted to do here, and we'll see you guys in the next video.